But today I want to talk about the gatekeepers, as they're called, in the black community. Who are the gatekeepers and what do they do? The definition of a gatekeeper is an attendant at a gate who is employed to control who goes through. And a second definition is a person or thing that controls access to something. The boule is said to be the gatekeepers of the black community. The boule is made up of members of Sigma Pi Phi fraternity. It is the first Greek letter society for African American men, and it was founded in 1904. As a point of reference, Booker T. Washington had founded the National Negro Business League in 1900 to promote the interests of African American businesses, and the main purpose of his organization was to promote commercial and financial development of black businessmen and women. It is important to note that Booker T. Washington's organization was open to women. It was established in 1900, so we have to know that there was a lot of discrimination against women at that time, but he did include women because he understood that in order for the African American people to advance, it was going to take both men and women. The boule was only open to men, college-educated men. The boule only accepts membership from men who are already successful in business. They don't have chapters on college campuses. However, they have a congenial relationship with black fraternities, as in they are very welcoming to members of Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi, Alpha Phi Alpha, Phi Beta Sigma, and Iota Phi Theta. So these two business networks, the National Negro Business League and the boule, were established to help African Americans network in business, commerce, education, politics, whatever the case would be, because the established white associations were not available to them. They were not open to them. The distinction should be made that the National Negro Business League was open to any African Americans that were active in business, pursuing business ventures, whereas the boule offered membership to professional people, college graduates. Booker T. Washington and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois were sort of adversaries at this time. And Booker T. Washington, of course, belonged to the Negro Business League, and Dr. Du Bois was an early member of the boule. Also, Booker T. Washington was very supportive of Black Wall Street in Tulsa. So that has to be noted. To know what the boule does is to know who the members are. And this is a small list of men that belong or did belong to the boule. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, author, professor, and activist. Dr. Martin Luther King, civil rights leader. Ralph Bunche, ambassador to the United Nations. Andrew Young, mayor of Atlanta, ambassador to the United Nations and civil rights leader. Douglas Wilder, governor of Virginia. Thurgood Marshall, Supreme Court Justice. Eric Holder, Attorney General of the United States under President Obama. John Lewis, a congressman from Georgia. And Kenneth Chenault, who was the CEO of American Express. These are African American leaders. They come from all walks of life, from politics, government, education, and business. They are called the gatekeepers of the African American community. I will read their mission statement, and then I can discuss what I know that some of these organizations do that these men belong to in addition to the boule. Their statement says that they are modeling leadership, education, and civic responsibility by supporting these endeavors and by mentoring the young men who will advance the African American community in all facets of equality, mutual respect, and devotion to democratic traditions. Also, in their historical information, they say that in the early years of Sigma Pi Phi, They were a secret organization, but in 1982 they adopted a policy of limited and selected publicity, and that usually has to do with money. When you open your organization up in ways like that, it's usually to do with the fact of money. Sigma Pi Phi, the boule, like all black Greek fraternities and sororities, is a service organization. These organizations were formed in the early 1900s, and the whole idea of them was to service the African American community because we did not have access to white organizations and associations. So these men and women formed these organizations to address the needs in the African American community. As far as these organizations being gatekeepers of the African American community, it first must be stated that every community has gatekeepers. The mayor, the city council, the governor, the state legislature, the President of the United States, the U.S. Congress, the Supreme Court, and everybody who works under those headings is a gatekeeper. So every community has gatekeepers. In the African American community, there is nobody who has any power outside of what the collective of African Americans give. So people who are operating as gatekeepers are people that are reliable in the sense that they do hold responsible positions. They have built successful businesses or successful careers for themselves. They are vetted in a way that any white person would be vetted. So if you need somebody to do something for the African American community, you go for the person that's already doing something in the African American community that the people respect.
National liberation, national reawakening, restoration of the nation to the people or commonwealth. Whatever the name used, whatever the latest expression, decolonization is always a violent event. At whatever level we study it, individual encounters, a change of name for a sports club, the guest list at a cocktail party, members of a police force, or the board of directors of a state or private bank. Decolonization is quite simply the substitution of one species of mankind by another. The substitution is unconditional, absolute, total, and seamless. We could go on to portray the rise of a new nation, the establishment of a new state, its diplomatic relations, and its economic and political orientation. But instead, we have decided to describe the kind of tabula rasa, which from the outset defines any decolonization. What is singularly important is that it starts from the very first day with the, what is singularly important is that it starts from the very first day with the basic claims of the colonized. In actual fact, proof of success lies in the social fabric that has been changed inside out. This change is extraordinarily important because it is desired, clamored for, and demanded. The need for this change exists in a raw, repressed, and reckless state that lives in the consciousness of colonized men and women. But the eventuality of such a change is also experienced as a terrifying future in the conscience of another species of men and women, the colons or the colonists. Decolonization, which sets out to change the order of the world, is clearly an agenda for total disorder. But it cannot be accompanied by the wave of a magical wand, a natural cataclysm, or a gentleman's agreement. Decolonization, we know, is an historical process. In other words, it can only be understood. It can only find its significance and become self-coherent insofar as so we can discern the history-making movement which gives its form and substance. Decolonization is the encounter between two congenitally antagonistic forces that in fact owe their singularity to the kind of reification secreted and nurtured by the colonial situation. Their first confrontation was colored by violence and their cohabitation, or rather the exploitation of the colonized by the colonizer, continued at the point of the bayonet and under cannon fire. The colonist and the colonized are old acquaintances, and consequently, the colonist is right when he says he knows them. It is the colonist who fabricated and continues to fabricate the colonized subject. The colonist derives his validity, i.e., his wealth, from the colonial system. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and we're starting our reading and review of Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth, which was published in, let's see, it was published in 1963. So we're reading thoughts from 1963, and I'm starting on page 1 and reading to page 30. This chapter is on violence. Chapter 1 is on violence. The actual chapter is 60 pages, but I want to split it up so we can make sure that we are getting what he's writing. So we're going to go with the first 30 pages for this video and the next 30 pages for the next video. But starting out talking about what it takes to decolonize a people, for people to decolonize themselves, to free themselves of colonization, to free themselves of, i.e., oppression, white supremacy. The video I was showing at the beginning was a video from a woman who calls herself Lady Boule. And Lady Boule is giving us the history of the boule. And I'm linking that video to what we're reading in here, because as I read more, you will see Frantz Fanon is talking about the role that the gatekeepers play in either helping the decolonization to happen or hurting the decolonization. But either way, we're going to learn about the role that the so-called gatekeepers play in helping to ensure that us as African Americans or Black people anywhere in the diaspora are able to, you know, regain our place in the world, be able to self-actualize, be able to become more than what we have been brought here to be, which is a labor force, right? But as Frantz Fanon said, decolonization in itself, it comes with violence, because you were colonized through violence, and you're not going to be decolonized through political means that may not lead to some kind of actual clash. Remember, arms is one of the things that the Western world, they spend a lot of money on arms to defend themselves, to maintain what they have. So don't get it twisted. You can try to be diplomatic. You can try to, like you say, you can try to agree your way out of it or pray your way out of all these things here. But remember, we're still here. We're still under the system. So what will it take to decolonize, for us to become decolonized, for us to become, put it in our terms today, what would it take for us to be free of white supremacy? And I do want to give a tidbit. Excuse my lighting and everything. I am not home, but the show must go on. So I know my lighting and everything isn't what it used to be, because I'm not at my house in my regular studio, but I want to make sure I still get this video out. So here it is. I got the best light I got. So let's jump back in it. Getting on page 2, we're getting more into decolonization. And remember, we're talking about decolonization, what it is, what role the colonizer plays, and what role the colonized plays. The people who are colonized, what role they play, but also what role do the elite of the colonized play in either helping or hurting the people to free themselves from colonial powers. Okay, so decolonization never goes unnoticed, for it focuses on and fundamentally alters being and transform the spectator crushed to a nonsensical state into a privileged actor, captured in a virally grandiose fashion by the spotlight of history. It infuses a new rhythm specific to a new generation of men with a new language and a new humanity. Decolonization is truly the creation of new men. But such a creation cannot be attributed to a supernatural power. The thing colonized becomes a man through a very process of liberation. Decolonization, therefore, implies the urgent need to thoroughly challenge the colonial situation. An urgent need to challenge the colonial situation, right? Its definition can, if we want to describe it accurately, be summed up in the well-known words, the last shall be first. Decolonization is verification of this. At a deprivative level, therefore, any decolonization is a success. It is bare reality. Decolonization reeks of red hot cannonballs and bloody knives. For the last can be first only after a murderous and decisive confrontation between the two protagonists. This determination to have the last move up in front, to have them clamber up too quickly, say some. The famous echelons of an organized society can only succeed by restoring to very means, including the course of violence. But we're also talking about unity, working in unity, working as a team, working as a unit, understanding our place, understanding that we need each other, understanding that in order for us to reach this echelon, in order for us to reach this specific goal, because this is a we goal, not an I goal, a we goal. So in order for us to reach this goal, we are first going to have to decolonize our minds so we can decolonize our actual physical spaces, right? Decolonizing our minds means to getting away from the rugged individualism, getting away, and we're going to talk, Fanon gets into it because he get deep, getting away from the person who has been led to believe that their individual success is enough. Your individual success is not enough. Your individual success and the power that your success can have only comes from the power that your group has, right? So you do not disorganize a society, however primitive it may be, with such an agenda if you are not determined from the very start to smash every obstacle encountered. The colonized who have made up their mind to make such an agenda into a driving force have been prepared for violence from the time immemorial. As soon they are born, it is obvious to them that their cramped world riddled with taboos can only be challenged by out and out violence, right? So once again, reinforcing, he's not encouraging violence. He's giving reality, though. Frantz Fanon is definitely not encouraging violence. He's not telling people to go out and be violent, but he's giving a realistic perspective. Once again, how did we become enslaved? How did we become colonized? What was the main contributing factor to the colonization? What was the main contributing factor to the enslavement of African people? Because the Europeans had to have some kind of power, some kind of might to do that. So what was that power? What was that might? They had instruments of force. They had greater instruments of force and a greater mindset of actual violence to get what they needed. That's what he's getting at. So in order for you to defeat that, you think you're going to be diplomatic to defeat the people who on their mind violence is the answer? You're not going to pull no heartstrings with those types of people. So if you are not willing, and I've said this so many times, he's getting at basically, if you're not willing to take it to the same level that they have taken it to, you're not serious about being free, because freedom ain't free. To become decolonized, you're going to have to earn it. You got to earn it. So the colonized world is a world divided into two. The dividing line, the border, is represented by the barracks and the police stations. In the colonies, the official legitimate agent, the spokesperson for the colonizer in the regime of oppression, is the police officer or the soldier. The capitalist society's education, whether secular or religious, the teachings of moral reflexes handed down from father to son, the exemplary integrity of workers, decorated after 50 years of loyal, faithful services, the fostering of love for harmony and wisdom, those aesthetic forms of respect for the status quo, and still in the exploited, a mood a mood of submission and inhibition, which considerably erased the task of agents of law and order. The capitalist countries, a multitude of sermonizers, counselors, and confusion mongers intervene between the exploited and the authorities. In colonial regions, however, the proximity and frequent direct intervention by the police and the military caused the colonized are kept under close scrutiny, the colonized by rifle butts and napalm. We have seen how the government's agents use a language of pure violence. The agent does not alleviate oppression or mass domination. He displays and demonstrates them with a clear conscience of the law enforcer and brings violence into the homes and minds of the colonized subject. That's how you reinforce your power. And also using agents of confusion to reinforce your power. And we're going to get more into that, right? How do you remain the colonizer? How do you continue what you have started? How do you continue the colonization? How do you keep a group of people at the level that you need them to be so you can continue, or you can even grow what you have created? This is not a game for the weak, but it is a team sport. So the team got to get our stuff together. The native sector is not complementary to the European sector. The two confront each other, but not in the service of a larger unity. Governed by a purely Aristotelian logic, they follow the dictates of mutual exclusion. There is no conciliation possible. One of them is superfluous. The colonist sector is a sector built to last, all stone and steel. It's a sector of lights and paved roads where the trash cans constantly overflows with strange and wonderful garbage, undreamed of leftovers. The colonists' feet can never be glimpsed, except perhaps in the sea, but then you can never get close enough. They are protected by solid shoes in a sector where the streets are clean and smooth, without a pothole, without a stone. The colonist sector is a slated, sluggish sector. Its belly is permanently full of good things. The colonist sector is a white folk sector, a sector of foreigners. Now, the colonized sector. The colonized sector, or at least the native quarters, the shantytown, the Medina, the reservation, the disreputable place inhabited by disreputable people. You are born anywhere, anyhow. You die anywhere from anything. It's a world with no space. People are piled one on top of the other. The shack squeezed tightly together. The colonized sector is a famished sector, hungry for bread, meat, shoes, coal, and light. The colonized sector is a sector that crushes and cowers, a sector on his knees, a sector that is prostrate. It's a sector of niggers, a sector of towel heads. The gaze that the colonized subject casts at the colonist sector is a look of lust, a look of envy, dreams of possession, every type of possession, of sitting in the colonist table and sleeping in his bed, preferably with his wife. The colonized man is an envious man. The colonist is aware of this as he catches the fruit of glance and constantly on his guard, realizing bitterly that they want to take our place. And it's true if there's not one colonized subject who at least one day does not dream of taking the place of the colonist. So he's talking about he's juxtaposing the lives of the colonizer versus the lives of the colonist. The colonizer has everything. The colonized has nothing. The colonized wants everything the colonized has. And Frantz Fanon is saying he doesn't just believe that the colonized wants the things that the colonist has, but the colonized want to be in the position of the colonist. The colonized want to be in power. The colonized want that space. It's deeper than just wanting the possessions. It's deeper than just having the flash and saying I attained and I'm in this space. It's I want that place. I want to be in charge. I want to be the power. I want to be a man. I want to be a woman. I want to be self-actualized. And what group of oppressed people, colonized people, wouldn't want to be self-actualized, especially a group of people as unique as us in America who have never had the opportunity to self-actualize? Of course, we want that space. That's the only space that we've ever known to have value. Now we are now being introduced to other spaces that have value, but that space, the white supremacist space, that is the space that historically has always had value, because that is the space that historically we have known. It's the only space we've known. It's the only space we've seen. That's the space that was given to us. And that's the space that we fight so hard to be a part of. But Fanon said, no, you don't just want to be in the space. You want to own the space. You want to be the colonist. You want to be them. But they know who you are. And because they know who you are, and because they know your desire, they're going to do everything in their power to crush your desire, to crush your will, to crush your dreams. You will not have this space. The colonist is saying you will not have this space, but the colonized is saying, I need that space. I need that space to survive. I need that space. The violence which governed the ordering of the colonial world, which tirelessly punctured the destruction of the indigenous social fabric and demolished unchecked the systems of reference of the country's economy, lifestyles, and modes of dress. The same violence will be vindicated and appropriated when taking history into their own hands to colonize, swarm into the forbidden cities, to blow the colonial world to smithereens, is henceforth a clear image within the grasp and the imagination of every colonized subject. To dislocate the colonial world does not mean that once the borders have been eliminated, there will be a right way between the two sectors. To destroy the colonial world means nothing less than demolishing the colonist sector, burying it deep within the earth, and banishing it from history. Challenging the colonial world is not a rational confrontation of viewpoints. It is not a discourse on the universal, but the impassioned claim by the colonized that their world is fundamentally different. The colonial world is I'm gonna mess this word up. Manichaean world. Manichaean world. And the Manichaean world means you're seeing things only black and white. Things are only black and white in your viewpoint. The colonial world is a Manichaean world. The colonist is not content with physically limiting the space of the colonized, i.e., with the help of his agents with his agents of law and order, as if to illustrate the totalitarian nature of colonial exploitation. The colonist turns to the colonized into a kind of quintessence of evil. Colonized society is not merely portrayed as a society without values. The colonist is not content with stating that the colonized world has lost its values, or worse, never possessed any. The native is declared impervious to ethics, representing not only the absence of values, but also the negation of values. He is, dare we say it, the enemies of values. In other words, absolute evil, the coercive element, destroying everything within its reach, a corrupting element, distorting everything which involves aesthetics or morals, an agent of malevolent powers, the unconscious and incurable instrument of blind forces. And Monsieur Mayer could say it in all seriousness in the French National Assembly that we should not let the republic be defined by the penetration of Algerian people, right? Values are in fact irreversibly poisoned and infected as soon as they come into contact with colonized. The customs of the colonized, their traditions, their myths, especially their myths, are a very mark of this indignance and inane depravity. This is why we should not place DDT, which destroys parasites, carriers of disease, on the same level as Christianity, which roots out heresy, natural impulses, and evil. The decline of yellow fever and the advances made by evangelizing from part of the same balance sheet, by triumphant reports from part of the same balance sheet, by but triumphant reports by the missions, in fact, tell us how deep the seeds of alienation have been sown among the colonized. I'm talking of Christianity, and this should come as no surprise to anybody. The church is the colonizers, excuse me, the church in the colonies is a white man's church. As a foreigner's church, it does not call the colonizing ways of God, but to the ways of the white man, to the ways of the master, the ways of the oppressor. As we know, it is the story many are called, but few are chosen. So, and this he's getting at the way the colonizer views the colonized, the way the Europeans view African people. The wretched. That's why he calls the book The Wretched of the Earth. They view us as people who are incapable of having morals. As a matter of fact, go on to say that if the African people come into contact with colonized and so-called moral and civilized societies, that the dirt or the grime and the filth of the colonized person will start to spread among the colonized society and affect everybody else and cause them to decline in morality and character, because the colonized person has no morality, has no character, has no values. It is a animalistic being that has to be tamed, that has to be broken. They treat us like animals, lock us up to break us down, right? Sometimes this Manichaeanism reaches its logical conclusion and dehumanizes the colonized subject. In plain talk, he is reduced to the state of an animal. And consequently, when the colonist speaks of the colonized, he uses zoological terms. See, allusion is made to the slithery movements of the yellow race, the odors of the native quarters, the stink, the swarming, the sweeting, the gestulations, and the endeavors. It at descriptions and finding the right word, the colonist refers constantly to the bestiarity. The European seldom has no problem with figures of speech, but the colonized, who immediately grasp the intention of the colonists at the exact case being made against them, know instantly what he is thinking. This explosive population growth, those hysterical masters, those blank faces, those shapeless, obese bodies, those headless, tallest cohorts, these children who seem not to belong to anyone, this indolent sprawling under the sun, this vegetating existence, all this is part of the colonial vocabulary. General de Gaulle speaks of yellow multitudes, and Monsieur Murat of the black, brown, and yellow hordes that will soon invade our shores. The colonized know all and roar with laughter every time they hear themselves called an animal by the other, for they know they are not animals. And at that very moment, when they discover their humanity, they begin to sharpen their weapons to secure its victory. And so, keeping Black people at a mental state of seeing ourselves as animals, because the moment we no longer see ourselves as animals, they feel is the moment we will sharpen our swords and come for our revenge. So therefore, we have to reinforce the mindsets onto these Black people that, yes, you are animals. Yes, you are at a lower state. Yes, you are beneath us. You are the savage natives. You are the savage people. You are just as savage today as you were when we found you. So get out of our way and know your place and stay in your place. And time to time, we'll use our law enforcement or whatever armed things we have in place to keep you in place, to keep you knowing your place. Because if you don't know your place, then you might try to come take our place. This is what Fanon is getting at. So as soon as the colonized begin to strain at the leash and to pose a threat to the colonists, they are assigned to a series of good souls who in the symposiums on culture spell out the specificity and richness of Western values. Here come the gatekeepers. Oh, here come the gatekeepers. But every time the issue of Western values crops up, the colonized grow tense and their muscles seize up. This is important. During the period of decolonization, the colonized are caused upon to be responsible. They are offered rock solid values. They are told in great detail about the decolonization should not mean regression, and that they must rely on values which have proved to be reliable and worthwhile. Now, it so happens that when the colonized hear speech on Western culture, they draw their machetes or at least check to see if they are close to hand. The supremacy of white values is stated with such violence and victorious confrontation of these values with the lifestyle and belief of the colonized is so impregnated with the aggressiveness that as a countermeasure, the colonized rigidly make a mockery of them whenever they are mentioned. In the colonial context, the colonists only quits undermining the colonized once the latter have proclaimed loud and clear that white values reign supreme. In the period of decolonization, the colonized masses thumb their noses at the very values, shower them with insults, and vomit them up. So you have a group of the colonized who see they see something important within European values, and these are the people who are being primed to be used against the masses who will be against the European values. Somebody has to calm the masses down. Somebody has to reinforce decolonization. Somebody has to keep them tamed. And you use people who look like them. You use their own people against them. You cherry pick and you pluck the so-called elite of them, the accomplished of them, the successful of them. You give them comfortable places. You breed rugged individualism into their mindsets. You make sure that they see themselves as having a place within white society. Because once they see themselves as having a place within white society, they will work to defend it because they want to defend their place because they don't want to go back to having nothing. They like having something. So they're going to defend their individual space. Right? See where it's going? So in defending your individual space within white society, you are turning your back on the whole of black society, which is crumbling. So, yeah. Gatekeepers. And first among them is individualism. Rugged individualism. And the first among them is individualism. The colonized intellectual learned from his masters that the individual must assert himself. The colonist bourgeoisie hammered into the colonized mind the notion of a society of individuals where each is looked in his subjectivity, where wealth lies in thought. Before the colonized intellectual who was lucky enough to bunker down with the people during the liberation struggle will soon discover the falsity of this theory. Involvement in the organization of the struggle will already introduce him to a different vocabulary. Brother, sister, comrades are words outlawed by the colonist bourgeoisie because of their thinking. My brother is my wallet and my comrade scheming. And a kind of auto-da-fe, the colonized intellectual witnesses the destruction of his idols, egoism, arrogant recrimination, and the idiotic childish need to have the last word. This colonized intellectual, pulverized by the colonist culture, will also discover the strength of the village assemblies, the power of the people's commissions, and the extraordinary productiveness of neighborhood and section committee meetings. Personal interests are now the collective interests because the reality everyone will be discovered by the French legionnaires and consequently massacred, or else everyone will be saved. In such a context, the every man for himself concept of the atheist from salvation is prohibited. So the rugged individualist, he's getting into to rugged individualists who have a taste of the whole of the team. They get to see what the team can do, and it starts to cognitive dissonance kicks in, and the duality of the situations kicks in, and now you're like, okay, I got my place, but dang, this is a whole. Now, we're not saying a whole bunch of these people are doing this, but we are very few who could see the value in Black people as a team and Black people working as a team, see themselves as a part of this whole of Black people rather than seeing themselves as the individual entities within the white societies. Seeing yourself as an individual entity within white society, aside from the Black society, that's harmful. Just like at this point, they have some Black women believing that they are separate from Black America. There are some Black women who believe that they are separate from Black America. The issues are separate and everything should be separate from Black America and the whole of Black America. And you can go look at the interview that Ice Cube had on that Fox Soul show with Vivica Fox and Lisa Ray and them when he was presenting his contract for Black America. And they asked him, where's his contract specific for Black women? And he was like, well, Black women are Black America. They were like, nah, we need our own specific thing. So that's an example of the buying into the regular individualism mindset of we are separate from the whole. You're not separate from the whole. We in this together, right? Self-criticism has been much talked about recently, but few realize that it was first of all an African institution. Whether it be the dilemmas of North Africa or the proverbs of West Africa, tradition has it that disputes which break out in the village are worked out in public. By this, I mean collective self-criticism with a touch of humor because everyone is relaxed. Because in the end, we all want the same thing. The intellectual sheds all that calculating, all those strange silences, those ulterior motives, that devious thinking, the secrecy, and he gradually plunges deeper among the people. In this respect, then we can genuinely say that the community has already triumphed and exudes its own light, its own reason. The community has to triumph over the individual. It has to triumph over the individual. What the community brings in the end is protection, is strength, is love, is unity, is harmony. All those things the community brings. We have to unite. We have to. That's the only way we can go from being colonized. In order to assimilate the culture of the oppressor and venture into his fold, the colonized subject has had to pawn some of his own intellectual possessions. So now we're getting back to the gatekeeper or the intellectual who is hell-bent on being a part of white society. So I must assimilate in the white society. So he's explaining the assimilation process, right? For instance, one of the things he has had to assimilate is the way the colonist bourgeoisie thinks. This is apparent in the colonized intellectuals' ineptitude to engage in dialogue, for he is unable to make himself inessential when confronted with a purpose or idea. On the other hand, when he operates among the people, he is constantly awestruck. He is literally disarmed by their good faith and integrity. He is then constantly at risk of becoming a demagogue. He turns into a kind of mimic man who nods in assert to every word by the people, transformed by him into an arbiter of truth. But the fella, the unemployed, and the starving do not lay claim to truth. They do not say they represent the truth because they are the truth in their very being. During this period, the intellectual behaves objectively like a vulgar opportunist. He behaves like a vulgar opportunist. His maneuvering, in fact, is still at work. The people will never think of rejecting him or cutting the ground from under his feet. What the people want for everything to be pulled together. The colonized intellectual's insertion into the humane tide will find himself on hold because he is curious because of his curious obsession with detail. It is not that the people are opposed to analysis. They appreciate clarification, understand the reasoning behind an argument, and like to see where they are going. But at the start of his cohabitation with the people, the colonized intellectual gives priority to detail and tends to forget the very purpose of the struggle, to defeat the colonialism, right? Because he's paying attention to climbing up that ladder and assimilating into white society. Swept along by the many facets of the struggle, he tends to concentrate on local tasks, undertaking zealously, but almost always too pandistically. He does not always see the overall picture, right? I'm gonna read that again. He does not always see the overall picture. He introduces the notion of disciplines, specialized areas, and fields into the awesome mixer and grinder called the People's Revolution. Committed to certain frontline issues, he tends to lose sight of the unity of the movement, and in the event of failure at the local level, he succumbs to doubt and even despair. The people, on the other hand, take a global stance from the very start. Bread and land. How do we go about getting bread and land? And this stubborn, apparently limited, narrow-minded aspect of the people is finally the most rewarding and effective working model. So the model, the mindset of the individual or the mindset of the people, the mindset of the group. You want to pay attention to getting your way up this ladder and assimilating yourself into white society and making sure that you help white society maintain their foot on our necks, or you come back with the people. You free your mind, take the chains off your mind, come back to the people and understand that, all right, well, let's simplify this thing. Let's make sure that we start with getting land. Land and food, land, food, because through that we can get power. We need land to get anything else. Land is what's needed. We need land, but we need food to sustain ourselves while we're getting this land. Bread and land. Bread and land. Land is what you need. Money, land, power, and resources. But land gives you the power. Well, land gets you the money and the resources. The group got to figure out what it's going to do to get itself power. For us, we got to figure out how we're going to become a group. The colonist makes history as he knows it. And because he refers constantly to the history of his metropolis, he plainly indicates that he is the extension of his metropolis. The history he writes is therefore not the history of the country he is despoiling, but the history of his own nation's looting, graping, and starving to death. The immobility to which the colonized subject is condemned can be challenged only if he decides to put an end to the history of the colonization and the history of despoliation in order to bring to life the history of the nation, the history of the decolonization. So, yeah, the winner writes that history, and the history of the colonized, the history of the defeated will only be written if A, the colonized chooses to write it, but remember, they're writing in their voice, or B, if the colonized now no longer are colonized and they're able to tell their own stories. You will, until the lion has the gun, shit ain't fun, right? A world compartmentalized, mechanism and petrified, a world of statues, the statue of the general who led to the conquest, the statue of the engineer who built the bridge, a world closure of itself, and crushing on the stoniness, the backbones of those scarred by the whip. This is the colonial world. The colonial subject is a man pent in. Apartheid is but one method of compartmentalizing the colonial world. The first thing the colonial subject learns is to remain in this place and not overstep his limits, right? Henceforth, the dreams of the colonial subject are muscular dreams, dreams of action, dreams of aggressive vitality. I dream I am jumping, swimming, running, and climbing. I dream I burst out laughing. I am leaping across a river and chased by a peak of cars that never catches up with me. During colonization, the colonized subjects free himself night after night between 9 in the evening and 6 in the morning. The colonized subject will first train his aggressive settlement and his muscles against his own people. This is the period when blacks turn on black and the police officers and magistrates don't know which way to turn when faced with the surprising surge of North African criminality. We shall see later what should be made of this phenomenon. Confronted with the colonial order of the colonized subject is a permanent state of tension. The colonist world is a hostile world, a world which excludes yet at the same time incites envy. We have seen how the colonized always dream of taking the colonist's place, not of becoming a colonist, but of replacing him. This hostile, oppressive, and aggressive world bulldozing the colonized masses represents not only the hell they would like to escape as quickly as possible, but a paradise within arm's reach guarded by ferocious watchdogs. So, so he gets when he's talking about, because he's getting into talking about how um, our aggression, the aggression that we want to show to the colonizers, we can't show to the colonizers because we don't have the might. So we repress that aggression within our minds, within our muscles, within our souls. And when that aggression does come out, it comes out upon one another. Because not only have we learned to see each other as our enemy, we are holding in all this anger and this aggression that we can't unleash against our true enemies. So the colonist keeps the colonized in a state of rage, which he prevents from boiling over. The colonized are caught in the tight-knit web of colonialism. But we have seen how the inside of the colonist achieves only a pseudo-petrification. The muscular tension of the colonized periodically erupts into bloody fighting between tribes, clans, and individuals, right? At the individual level, we witness a genuine negation of common sense, whereas the colonists or police officers can beat the colonized subject day in and day out, insult him, and shove him to his knees. It is not uncommon to see the colonized subject draw his knife at the slightest hostile or aggressive look from another colonized subject. For the colonized subject's last resort is to defend his personality against his fellow countrymen. Enter Tribal feuds merely perpetuate age-old grudges entrenched in memory. By throwing himself muscle and soul into the blood feuds, the colonized subject endeavors to convince himself that colonialism has never existed, that everything is as it used to be, and history marches on. Here we grasp the full significance of the all too familiar head in the sand behavior at the collective level, as if the collective immersion in a fractional bloodbath suffices to mask the obstacle and postpone the inevitable alternative, the inevitable emergence of the armed struggle against colonization. So one of the ways the colonized subject releases its muscular tension is through the very real collective self-destruction. The self-destruction of these tribal feuds. Such behavior represents a death wish in the face of danger, a self-deleting conduct which reinforces the colonist's existence and domination and reassures him that such men are not rational. So understanding that's the colonists understanding colonized. So if I reinforce my dominance, they will soon start to destroy themselves, and we're going to have to do less and less as far as physical force to keep them in check that we used to, because they will be busy destroying themselves. So let's maintain these mindsets. Let's maintain these environments. Let's maintain these spaces. Let's maintain ourselves, because the more they destroy themselves, the easier it would be for us to maintain power. In the liberation struggle, however, this people who were once relegated to the realm of immigration, victims of unspeakable terrors, but content to lose themselves in hallucinatory dreams, are thrown out into disarray, reform, and amid blood and tears give birth to the very real and urgent issues, giving food to the mujahideen, stationing lookouts, helping deprived families, and taking over from the slain and imprisoned husband. Such are the practical lacks of the people are asked to undertake in the liberation struggle. In the colonial world, the colonized effectively is kept on edge like a running source, flinching from a causatic agent, and the psyche restricts, is obliterated, and finds an outlet through muscular spasms that have caused many to expert Many experts to classify the colonized as hysterical. We crazy. Basically saying how our insanity is creeping in and causing us to destroy ourselves and everything around us. The overexcited affectivity spilled in the invisible guardians who constantly communicate with the core of the personalities takes an erotic delight in the muscular deflation of the crisis. Another aspect of the colonized effectively can be seen when it is drained of energy by the ecstasy of dance. Any study of the colonial world, therefore, must include an understanding of the phenomena of dance and possession. The colonized way of relaxing is precisely this muscular orgy during which the most brutal aggressiveness and impulsive violence are channeled, transformed, and spirited away. Dance circle is a permissive circle. It protects and empowers. At a fixed time and a fixed date, men and women assemble in a given place and under the solemn gaze of the tribe launch themselves into a seemingly disarticulate but in fact extremely ritualized dance where the exorcism, liberation, and expression of a community are grandiosely and spontaneously played out through shaking of the head and back and forth thrusts of the body. Everything is permitted in the dance circle. The hill lock, which has been climbed as if to get closer to the moon. The riverbank, which has been descended whenever the dance symbolizes ablution. Washing and purification are sacred places. Everything is permitted, for in fact, the sole purpose of the gathering is to let the supercharged libido and the stiff aggressiveness uh, spew out volcanically, symbolic killings, figurative cavalcades, and imagined multiple murders. Everything has come out, the ill humors seeping out, tumultuous as lava flow. So he's also getting at how dance is being used to get out that tension, that energy, that rage, that dark force that we have for our oppressors, that we want to inflict on our oppressors, but we know we can't inflict on them. So another way to get that out is through dance, through these ritualistic dances, through these dances where sometimes we get put into trance, and sometimes these over sexualized or these aggressive dances. This is another way that colonized people have adapted, and another coping method being used to express ourselves and to get out the tension and get out the force. Because god damn, we've been locked up for a while and we don't know what to do. All we know is we've been colonized. All we know is we've been programmed to become these people who don't value ourselves. We don't love ourselves. We're violent to ourselves, and that's sad. So the colonist bourgeoisie is aided and abetted in the pacification of the colonized by the inescapable powers of religion. All the saints who turned the other cheek, who forgave those who trespassed against them, who without flinching were spit up and insulted, are championed and shown as an example. The elite of the colonized countries, those emancipated slaves, once they are at the head of the movement, and inevitably end up producing an earth's ah, God damn. The colonized bourgeoisie is aided and abetted by the pacification of the colonized by the inescapable powers of religion. All the saints who turned the other cheek, who forgave those who trespassed against them, who without flinching were spat upon and insulted, are championed and shown as an example. The elite of the colonized countries, those emancipated slaves, once they are at the head of the movement, inevitably end up producing an erratic struggle. They use the term slavery of their brothers to shame the slave drivers or to provide their oppressors, financial competitors, with the ideology of insipid humanitarianism. Never, in fact, do they actually appeal to the slaves. Never do they actually mobilize them. On the contrary, at the moment of truth for them, the lie, they brandish the the threat of mass mobilization as a decisive weapon that would, as if by magic, put an end to the colonial regime. There are revolutionaries obviously within these political parties among the cadres who deliberately turn their backs on the farce of national independence. But their speeches, their initiatives, and their angry outbursts very soon antagonize the party machine. These factions are gradually isolated, then removed altogether at the same time as if they were dialectical concomitants. The colonial police swoops down upon them, hounded in the towns, shunned by the militants, rejected by the party leaders. These undesirables with their inflammatory attitude end up in the countryside. It is then they realize in a kind of intoxication that the peasant masses latch onto their every word and do not hesitate to ask them the questions for which they are not prepared. When do we start? False leaders. False leaders. Who are you following? Who are we exalting? Who are we putting on pedestals? Who are we allowing to speak for us? When the political leader summons the people to a meeting, there could be said to be blood in the air. Yet very often the leader is mainly preoccupied with a show of force so as to not use it. The excitement that is fostered, however, the comings and goings, the speech making, the crowds, the police presence, the military might, the arrest, and the deportation of leaders. All this agitation gives the people the impression the time has come for them to do something. During the time of unrest, the political parties multiply the calls for calm to the left, while to the right they search for the horizon, endeavoring to decipher the liberal intentions for the colonial authorities. The emergence of the new nation and the demolition of the colonial system are the result of either a violent struggle by the newly independent people or outside violence by other colonized people, which has an inhabiting effect on the colonial regime. Right? So the bourgeoisie gatekeepers who have been leading Black people for a while, not all, but a good majority. Well, we have to ask, when it comes to our leaders, the people who are the successful, the elite, the ones that we elevate, when it comes to them, what actual outcomes are we getting from them? What actual outcomes, and I mean practical outcomes that lead to our progress, that leads to Black progress. Are we getting these outcomes from these people? Because are these the people who have assimilated themselves into white society and are being placed in front of us to keep us at bay, to keep us in this oppressed state, to keep us colonized, to keep us depressed, to keep us subjugated? Are these the people that we're dealing with? Because I'm just saying, if so, that explains a lot. That explains why we are still here in this space and things are getting worse for us, especially here in America in 2024. That would explain a lot. Going back to the beginning of the video, the boule, the people who we always rely on are not reliable. And it's going to be high time for the masses to realize that, hey, it's time for us to do something different. I think a bit of that is happening, especially when you look at the political space, but we're looking at it from a Democratic Party stance, not actually as the individuals and those who we rely on as the leaders, but also the followers need to be checked as well. We are in a place to be the wretched of the earth because we lack the power to actually overthrow the colonists. At the end of the day, that's one of the main points. That's why this chapter is called the violence. It's called On Violence, On Violence. To become colonized, somebody has to be able to overpower you. To remain colonized, those people have to continue that power. But in order for you to free yourself from colonization, you have to have power. So how will we build that power? How will we gain that power? How will we no longer become the wretched of the earth? So that's the first part of chapter 1 on violence. And we're going to pick up at the bottom paragraph on page 30 and move into page 60. 62 for the next video. So for the next video, we're going from pages 30 to 62. This video pages 1 to page 30. And there's also a preface and a forward in this book that I think you should read as well. But I want to go ahead and get started with the content on page 1. Then we can come back to that. But Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. Been waiting to read this. I like what he's getting into so far. So, but remember, he's talking about decolonization from an African standpoint, from an African continental standpoint, in 1962. So we're going to get the information and we're going to make it relevant to where we are in 2024. So let's get started, man. Here we are. Let's do this and make sure you catch the next video coming up. I love y'all.